The following is distributed by the Berean Call.
Chapter 5. The Coming World Government. A ruthless, vicious, totalitarian government saying all of the right things about peace, love, and brotherhood will soon take control of planet Earth. Nothing can stop it. The United States, after its sudden and mysterious collapse, will be powerless, a mere pawn in the process. Will this be something that the fabled trilateralists will bring about? No, the conspiracy is much larger than that and far too powerful for the trilateralists to control. Much of an alarmist nature has been rumored about a conspiracy among top political leaders in Washington to betray America's national interests. These men, all members or former members of the Trilateral Commission and/or Council of Foreign Relations, CFR, are said to be working hand in glove with certain highly placed communist leaders in an international conspiracy to bring about a world government. Stretching from Washington to London, Paris, Bonn, Moscow, and Tokyo, this mysterious web of intrigue is alleged to include the wealthiest families in the world. Names like Krupp, Rothschild, and Rockefeller are mentioned along with the allegation that international bankers financed the Russian Revolution 65 years ago and have been backing both sides in every war since then. There is no doubt some truth in such reports. However, the trilateralists and CFR people are invariably referred to with exaggerations that seem to attribute omniscience and omnipotence to the quote-unquote internationalists. Take, for example, the following statement from a fall 1982 promotional mailer for The Spotlight, the weekly Liberty Lobby newspaper. Quote, "The handwriting is on the wall. The trilateralists are in control. And it happened so swiftly, so cleverly, so well planned that even those of us who know the awful truth cannot help but marvel at their cunning." Well before Election Day, the Rockefeller-led consortium of internationalists had a battle plan, operational in the event of President Reagan's election, and by midnight of election night, Ronald Reagan's policies and your vote were held captive by a faceless, anonymous group known as David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission, a powerful, ominous force affecting the well-being of all American patriots." Unquote. Such reports have surrounded the quote-unquote trilateralists with a terrifying mystique. Is there indeed a faceless, anonymous group so diabolically cunning and powerful that it can actually take control of any president of the United States the instant he is elected? Does this group really manipulate the president, Congress, and cabinet like so many puppets? And does this hypnotic control extend to every nation on earth? That seems a bit too much to believe. If they indeed have the power to do so, one wonders why these internationalists haven't yet installed their puppet world ruler. Exaggerated reports like the above play into the hands of the internationalists by causing reasonable persons to doubt the whole idea of a conspiracy to set up a world government. That could be dangerous. The Sincere Conspirators. It is a fact that members of several elite political organizations here and abroad are part of an international conspiracy to establish a world government. However, is that bad? How else can there be a just and lasting worldwide peace? Surely a world government should not be considered evil, but the best hope for preventing a nuclear holocaust. Yet many object that it could only be established at the cost of freedoms that distribute Western wealth among the poorer countries, forcing communism on the world, which would destroy the world rather than save it. Just imagine the collectivization of America's farms. Who would feed the world then? Better to die instantly from a nuclear bomb than to die slowly by starvation, says the argument. In several of his books, H.G. Wells seems to have anticipated with uncanny accuracy the steps leading to the coming world government. While proposing a worldwide benevolent socialism, he had no illusions about communism, which he rejected with these words, quote, "In practice, Marxism is found to resort to malignantly destructive activities and to be practically impotent in the face of material difficulties. In Russia, where Marxism has been put to the test, each year shows more and more clearly that Marxism and communism are digressions from the path of human progress. The one main strand of error in that theory is the facile assumption that the people at a disadvantage will be stirred to anything more than chaotic and destructive expressions of resentment. We reject the delusive belief in that magic giant, the proletariat, who will dictate, arrange, restore, and create." Unquote. Instead, he predicted that the New World Order would be in the hands of, quote, "an elite of intelligent, religious-minded people." Unquote. The religion of these sincere conspirators, as Wells laid it out and confessed it to be his own, was exactly what the Bible describes as the religion of the coming Antichrist. Few people will notice this, however, so intent will they be upon saving the world from nuclear holocaust. Their goals will be so sincere and seem so logical that a lasting, genuine peace can only come through worldwide control over the nationalistic interests that otherwise compete for territories, resources, wealth, and power, and that create wars in the process. As H.G. Wells pointed out over 50 years ago, quote, "It is impossible for any clear-headed person to suppose that the ever more destructive stupidities of war can be eliminated from human affairs until some common political control dominates the earth. To avoid the positive evils of war and to attain the new levels of prosperity and power, an effective world control, not merely of armed forces but of the production and main movements of staple commodities and the drift and expansion of population, is required. It is absurd to dream of peace and worldwide progress without that much control. I am discussing whether our species is to live or die." Unquote. Raised to be an evangelical by his mother, H.G. Wells became an apostate enemy of Christianity. A close friend of T.H. Huxley, Wells was an avid evolutionist and an atheist. Yet he had a religion, a belief that an elite of godlike men would evolve in due time, quote, "take the world in hand and create a sane order." Unquote. The world would be transformed through his apostate religion. It is doubtful that Wells realized that he was prophesying the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, quote, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for the apostasy comes first, and then the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction." Unquote. Many of the other Fabian socialists besides H.G. Wells, such as George Bernard Shaw and others, were apostate rebels from earlier Christian upbringings, and they did their best to promote a new world order based upon that apostasy. Wells, however, seemed to know that it would not come in his generation, but probably in the next. Quote, "For my generation, the role of John the Baptist must be our extreme ambition. We can proclaim and make evident the advent of a new phase of human faith and effort. We can point out the path it has been our life work to discover. Here, we say, is the basis for a new world. Saving the impact of some unimagined disaster from outer space, the ultimate decision of the fate of life upon his planet lies now in the will of man." Unquote. The Open Conspiracy. The idea of a world government has been around for a long time. What is new today is the fact that almost everyone is coming to the same conclusion, and in the desperation of the hour, millions of people are doing something about it. The trilateralists, CFR people, and other internationalists are no longer the only ones working for a new world order. As H.G. Wells predicted, the quote-unquote conspiracy has now become an open movement involving hundreds of millions of quote-unquote believers. Most of these open conspirators, as Wells prophesied, have in mind a worldwide unity that will be built less upon government than the internationalists intend, and more upon a fundamental people-to-people relationship. That this could very well happen is being demonstrated by networks of thousands of groups of ordinary citizens already working together around the world in the new and powerful peace movement. Again, it seems to have been anticipated by Wells, who wrote, quote, "What we work toward is synthesis, and this communal effort is the adventure of humanity." Unquote. Something important is taking shape, a huge, growing grassroots movement that is not so much political as it is religious, though not in the ordinary sense. It is a new spirituality, a mysticism that is too big to be confined within the narrow limits of any religion. H.G. Wells predicted that this quote-unquote new religion would sweep away old institutions and usher in a new world order that would save the human race from destruction. Quote, "The conspiracy of modern religion against the established institutions of the world must be an open conspiracy." Unquote. That the religion he referred to was Eastern mysticism and anti-Christian is clear. Quote, "There was no creation in the past, but eternally there is a creation. There was no fall, but a stormy ascent. If religion is to develop unifying and directive power, it must adapt itself. Man's soul is part of a greater being which lived before he was born and will survive him. The idea of a survival of the definite individual dissolves to nothing in this new view of immortality." Unquote. The same belief that Wells expressed is now verified by physics, according to Fritjof Capra, forming the basis for his new worldview. Erwin Laszlo, world order theorist and Club of Rome member, has declared that, quote, "a new age of global community is upon us, whether we like it or not." Unquote. This seems to be the culmination of a process that has been going on for a long time and is now accelerating to some apparent climax. Fritjof Capra says we are in a, quote, "crisis of perception." Unquote. Mark Satin has said, quote, "The world is being not just changed but transformed. The concept of the person is expanding. The spiritual human potential, feminist and environmental movements," unquote, "are the key to the New World Order." Of great importance is the fact that increasing numbers of the world's top scientists are embracing this quote-unquote new consciousness because it seems to agree with the most recent discoveries and theories of science. Fritjof Capra, brilliant University of California at Berkeley research physicist, insists that, quote, "we are trying to solve the problems of our time by applying an outdated worldview, the mechanistic concepts of Cartesian Newtonian science which are no longer adequate." Unquote. Arguing for a new planetary consciousness, Dr. Capra declared, quote, "We live today in a globally interconnected world requiring an ecological perspective, a new vision of reality, a fundamental change in our thoughts, perceptions, and values. The most severe consequence of this outmoded worldview today is the ever-increasing threat of nuclear war, brought about by an overemphasis upon self-assertion, control, and power, a pathological obsession with winning in a situation where you can't win any longer because no one can win in nuclear war. The worldview of modern physics is holistic and ecological. It emphasizes the fundamental interrelatedness and interdependence of all phenomena." Unquote. Global consciousness. The space program in particular has contributed significantly to this growing sense of quote-unquote planetary consciousness that Dr. Capra and so many others are speaking of today. Our landings on the moon gave us a new view of Spaceship Earth, as it is being called. As a result of his trip to the moon on Apollo 14, for example, astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell had a mystical experience of the unity and sacredness of all life. Abandoning the outer space program, he joined the millions searching within themselves for the true self, God, in quote-unquote higher states of consciousness. Since then, he has become a popular lecturer at the large Unity Church in West Palm Beach, Florida, a New Age center that practices and promotes the apostate quote-unquote modern religion that Wells predicted would one day take over the world through a quote-unquote open conspiracy. Growing numbers of leading clergymen, such as Theodore Hesburgh, president of Notre Dame, and James Parks Morton, dean of New York's Episcopal Cathedral of St. John the Divine, both strong supporters of the Planetary Initiative, are advocating and working toward a New Age quote-unquote planetary society. This goal of the huge New Age movement is pursued by thousands of grassroots groups linked around the world by networks. They expect a new world order to emerge out of a transformation of individual consciousness to a quote-unquote higher state, unity consciousness, that expresses universal love and oneness with all life, based upon Mueller's, quote, all-pervading force, unquote. That is, the alleged, quote-unquote God within all. As John Graham, a leader in Planetary Initiative for the World We Choose, has said, quote, it's human consciousness that has to be reached all the way to the White House to transform consciousness, unquote. This new quote-unquote global consciousness was clearly reflected in the international contents of that gold record attached to Voyager 1 and 2 space vehicles, on which was recorded a message to any intelligent life that might come across it in space. A statement was included from President Carter, which reflected not only his sympathy with the global goals of the CFR and Trilateral Commission, but an even larger dream. Quote, "This Voyager spacecraft was constructed by the United States of America, a community of 240 million human beings among the more than 4 billion who inhabit the planet Earth, still divided into nation-states, but rapidly becoming a single global civilization. We cast this message into the cosmos, a present from a small distant world. We hope someday, having solved the problems we face, to join a community of galactic civilizations." Unquote. The Aquarian Conspiracy. Beginning with the drug movement of the 1950s that moved into Eastern mysticism in the 1970s, untold millions of Westerners have had a mystical yet extremely real experience of quote-unquote unity consciousness, just as Edgar Mitchell did on Apollo 14. Whether it came under psychedelic drugs, transcendental meditation, or other forms of yoga and Eastern mysticism, this powerful quote-unquote realization of oneness with all life and with the universe itself has become a compelling force preparing the way for a new world order, transcending narrow nationalistic limits. It would not be too much to say that a mystical, quote, one-world consciousness, unquote, is sweeping planet Earth in preparation for the coming world ruler. It is interesting that when H.G. Wells wrote of the quote-unquote open conspiracy that would eventually establish the New World Order, he declared, quote, "This is my religion, the truth and the way of salvation. It is astir already in many intelligences, an immense and hopeful revolution in human affairs," unquote. There is overwhelming evidence that what Wells predicted is happening at last, that it is not a chance phenomenon, and that it is already much too big for the trilateralists to control. Millions of people today sincerely believe that this quote-unquote Aquarian Conspiracy, as Marilyn Ferguson has called it in her best-selling book of that name, is being engineered by mysterious, invisible intelligences who have been guiding human destiny from behind the scenes since the beginning. Again, H.G. Wells hinted at this in 1901 when he wrote, quote, "It is as if a hand had been put upon the head of a thoughtful man and had turned his eyes about from the past to the future," unquote. Mediumistic dictations received in a trance state or via automatic writing have convinced many serious, well-educated followers of various Eastern gurus and spiritualist cult leaders that these entities are quote-unquote ascended masters or quote-unquote masters of wisdom, allegedly highly evolved past inhabitants of Earth, members of our own race who have moved on after death to quote-unquote higher planes of existence. The writings of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, early leader of the Theosophical Society, contained many references to these entities, whom she sometimes referred to as, quote, the Great White Brotherhood, unquote. Hitler believed fanatically in them. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, known as quote-unquote Guru Ma, claims to be in constant telepathic contact with them today, and the many followers of the Church Universal and Triumphant, which she heads, base their lives upon alleged dictations from these so-called ascended masters or masters of wisdom. Are quote-unquote ETs involved? On the other hand, a number of highly qualified scientific investigators have become highly convinced by the evidence that these mysterious and as yet elusive entities are highly evolved inhabitants of other planets, ETs, who placed us here and have been monitoring our evolutionary progress ever since. In this view, the increased UFO activity of recent years is an apparent indication that these quote-unquote guardians of our destiny believe we are almost ready for their return to take visible control over the next step in our development, a quantum evolutionary leap to a higher consciousness. After so many years of supposed sightings, but nothing tangible in hand, the average person has probably grown weary of UFO stories and written it all off as a delusion. Supposedly, the Air Force and other government agencies, having concluded that UFOs were a figment of overactive imaginations, closed the book years ago on any further investigation. That view, however, has been exposed as a blatant lie by, of all things, a recent Supreme Court ruling that was only briefly reported on the back pages of a relatively few newspapers. Quote, "Files on UFOs can be withheld," High Court says. Washington, AP. The Supreme Court Monday refused to order the National Security Agency to disclose what it knows about unidentified flying objects. The court, without comment, let stand a ruling that the agency's files on the subject do not have to be made public under the Freedom of Information Act. A group calling itself Citizens Against UFO Secrecy had sought all the executive branch agency's documents relating to UFOs. The agency released some information, but withheld other data. In November, the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington upheld a trial judge's ruling that the disputed information must remain secret because it, quote, "clearly relates to most sensitive activities," unquote, of the agency, unquote. The U.S. Supreme Court is much too busy to protect non-existent or unimportant information. It is clear that the government knows something about UFOs that it refuses to tell. Despite rumors about little green ETs on ice and wrecked UFOs in Air Force warehouses, it seems more likely that the information we have is beyond the ability of any government on Earth to cope with or to fully comprehend. Something real is out there, but it seems to be more spiritual than physical. There is sufficient evidence, which we cannot cover here, to indicate that UFOs are just part of a larger conspiracy. The mysterious plan. Whether one calls these elusive entities quote-unquote space brothers or quote-unquote masters of wisdom seems irrelevant. No matter what identity they assume, the mode of operation and the message they communicate is basically the same. They are going to guide us into a new world order of peace and brotherhood based upon the essential perfection of our quote-unquote higher self and the oneness of all life. Even among ordinarily skeptical scientists, there is a growing belief in the existence of these mysterious guardians. Of even greater significance is the fact that alleged telepathic communications to select disciples from these quote-unquote masters of wisdom over the past 100 years, and more recently from so-called quote-unquote space brothers, have anticipated the present awakening of global consciousness with startling accuracy. There is considerable evidence that these beings, whatever one calls them, have in fact orchestrated the quote-unquote consciousness revolution. The similarities are too close for coincidence between quote-unquote the plan that H.G. Wells laid out in detail in 1928 in The Open Conspiracy and information received from the quote-unquote masters, such as in the following quote-unquote dictation. Quote, "The plan is concerned with expanding human consciousness. It will reveal to man the true significance of his mind and brain, and will make him therefore omnipresent and eventually open the door to omniscience. The implementation of this plan has been the objective of all esoteric training given during the past 400 years. Humanity needs to realize that there is a plan and to recognize its influence in unfolding world events, expansions of consciousness into which Aquarius is hurrying mankind. The plan is concerned with rebuilding mankind. As human beings begin to take the higher initiations, the true nature of the divine will be grasped. The masters are working according to a plan which will demonstrate a large measure of world unity marked by universality that aims at expanding human consciousness founded in love and goodwill." Unquote. One of the remarkable factors that forces us to regard the plan as something more than fantasy is the obvious conjunction existing today between these mystical states of consciousness, alleged telepathic communications about the coming New World Order, and the recent development of computer technology that suddenly makes the plan possible on a practical basis. It seems quite clear, for example, that we are moving rapidly toward a cashless society. This has only recently become possible through today's computer technology and was not feasible even a few years ago. Eventually, every transaction will be by credit card alone. With only one credit card for each person, government issued and number controlled, the plan will be well on its way to implementation. Convergence of prophecy and technology. Recent developments in computer technology have made the next step in the plan possible. To create an international electronic network that will give a gas station attendant, cashier in a restaurant, or store clerk anywhere in the world instant access to a central computer network telling him whether a particular credit card is good at that moment for the amount of a given purchase. This developing system has many obvious advantages that can't be argued against, including elimination of the loss of billions of dollars from forged, stolen, or bad checks, elimination of the millions of muggings and bank and store robberies, elimination of countless hours spent in making deposits in banks, cashing checks, and approving credit. Having all transactions for each quote-unquote planetary citizen computerized under a single credit card number is clearly the next step toward a cashless society with its many undeniable advantages. The one obvious problem remaining will be the card itself. How can it be safeguarded against accidental loss, forgery, or theft? The only real solution will be exactly what the Bible predicted 1900 years ago when it warned of the coming Antichrist. Every person must have indelibly impregnated into his or her body an identifying number readily accessible to a scanning device, thus eliminating altogether the credit card and its inherent shortcomings. The Apostle John wrote, quote, "And he causes all, the small and the great, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, that no one should be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark." Unquote. Of course, the mark will be invisible except to the scanner, and the logical place is just where the Bible predicted 1900 years ago, on the hand or forehead. The Bible specified that this mark would be a number, which the Antichrist would use to regulate international and local commerce and finance. The fact that something which modern technology has only recently made possible was described with such accuracy 1900 years ago might be considered a quote-unquote lucky coincidence were it not for the hundreds of other Bible prophecies that have already come true. The odds against all of these being the result of chance are so astronomical that it would require far more faith to believe that than to believe that God inspired the writers of the Bible. This transformation has been quietly taking place and will probably be completed over the next few years. Nothing will stop this process now. We've gone too far down the road in that direction to turn back. It is too logical and its benefits are too great for people to pay any attention to biblical warnings about an alleged Antichrist. That will be passed off as coincidence. What should concerned persons do, those who don't wish to participate in the Antichrist's new order? There seems to be no prohibition in the Bible against participation up to the point where the final credit card must be turned in and the number on it transferred to the hand or forehead. There is one way to escape this situation altogether, which we will explain later. Otherwise, it will be either the wrath of God for those who take the mark, or else death at the hands of the Antichrist's minions for those who don't. Quote, "As many as do not worship the image of the beast, that is Antichrist, will be killed. If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or upon his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God." Unquote. Why the delay? All of the advanced technology necessary to complete the process now exists, and most of the actual electronic equipment is already in operation. The plans have been laid, yet there is a delay. Why? If the general public knew all that is being planned, they would raise a storm of protest. Therefore, the process is being carried out very quietly and slowly. Even so, the consequences that are already obvious are frightening, and Christians in particular have begun to sound the alarm. Among the general public, there is also an instinctive fear of the awesome power of electronic control. The system is being implemented cautiously, one step at a time, in order to prevent a general protest. We are like the proverbial frog in a pot of water that never jumps out because the temperature is raised so slowly that the frog cooks to death without recognizing the danger. At the present time, there is no indication either from the Bible or world events that the Antichrist is already exerting his insidious influence from behind the scenes. A computer-controlled, cashless society will probably be in existence before he seizes control of the world. For how long before, we don't know, but it will probably be in existence only a matter of weeks or months, not years. Only after the Antichrist takes over will the last credit card be eliminated and the mark on the hand or forehead be required. The world leader who puts that final stage into effect will be identifying himself very definitely as the Antichrist. When that happens, it will be too late for anyone to escape except by death. In the meanwhile, the delay seems to fit Bible prophecy. Paul wrote that the Antichrist would not be able to make his move to take over the world until God allowed it to happen. Quote, "He who now restrains him from being revealed will do so until he is taken out of the way." Unquote. The inference seems to be that the Holy Spirit present in the followers of Christ around the world is the restraint that prevents a premature emergence of, quote, "the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction." Unquote. At times of great crisis and turning points in history, the majority opinion is often and perhaps nearly always wrong. This fact alone suggests a contrary scenario. However, we must build the scenario cautiously, carefully weighing all of the evidence and trends in relation to Bible prophecies. Each piece must fit the puzzle. The way this particular piece, for example, the cause of the delay, fits will become clear only in a later chapter. There we will see its relationship to the sudden elimination of the United States as a world power. Before getting to that, however, it is necessary to piece together several other factors. A world government is coming soon. Nothing can stop it now. However, the nuclear holocaust cannot be unleashed until after the Antichrist assumes world control and establishes peace and prosperity for a time. We face not only a coming world government, but also a coming world religion. In the space age, it must have the endorsement of science. What could this religion be? It takes no great genius to realize that if the Bible calls its leader the Antichrist, then this religion must be anti-Christian. However, Jesus himself warned that this man would pretend to be the Christ, and that his masquerade would be so clever and convincing that it would, quote, mislead, if possible, even the elect, unquote. From what the Bible tells us, it is clear that the coming world religion will appeal to everyone, to the members of all religions, and even to atheists, materialistic scientists, and psychiatrists. At the same time, it will seem to be Christian. So far, at least, it sounds somewhat similar to the quote-unquote positive Christianity that Hitler claimed to be establishing in Germany and intended for the entire world.